Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what part of the world you're in. I'm Kevin Koym, and I'm happy to excited to have you here. I got quite a story to tell you today, and it's not. I don't know that I'm really ready for this story, so it's interesting to review 20 years of working with entrepreneurs worldwide. Reflection. I'll tell you what I mean by that in just a little bit, but interesting. Welcome to the Venture Outfitter. The whole idea behind the Venture Outfitter is this is our program where we tie all these different entrepreneurs we've been working with around the world together. We try to have a weekly broadcast to pull people together to share insight and stuff like that. And today I'm going to talk about this idea behind the idea behind the idea. Next week, we're going to have Barry Thornton, who is a very colorful, very successful Austin entrepreneur. He has started companies like ClearCube and Austin Audio Works and a number of others. He's one of my advisors, and sometimes my favorite thing, although we changed the title a little bit. We hadn't updated the slide just yet, but he likes to ask me all the time, what the F are you doing? And so part of the thing that I'm, since he's one of my advisors and I get together with him around once a month, and he asks me usually this is going to be one of the things I'm attempting to ask myself in front of you guys about the last 20 years or so. So for just a moment, we'll take just a little bit of a breath. There's a lot of things happening around the Tech Ranch. If you don't know, I will make sure that I share some of the stuff, but I don't have a special slide about this, but if you're not already connected in and you're here in the broadcast for the first time or something like that, make sure you go to techranch.com/connect. And there's also different ways you can plug into the Tech Ranch network. And we'd love to have you, whether it's as a country manager, a entrepreneur, a mentor, someone who'd like to get more involved in the depth of the business or the nonprofit initiatives. There's a lot of things happening around the ranch, and I'm going to talk a little bit about them, but I'm going to go through a little bit of a 20-year history. But today, it's my birthday. It's my 55th birthday, and there's been an interesting history of the last little bit of time. And so part of the thing that I thought I would attempt to do on my birthday, and I'm not sure that I'll fully do this to the extent that I'd like to, I want to actually share with you reviewing 20 years of working with entrepreneurs worldwide, a reflection. 20 years ago, I was this whole process had taken off, and I had there's a story I'm going to attempt to tell you. And I say attempt because one of the hardest things about reflecting on what I wanted to talk about during this is I really wanted to figure out how to tell you something about the story of Tech Ranch. And the truth is that I kept on coming back to some of the early history that has come true. And so it's an interesting reflection. And so at some point, I'm going to do my best to be listening or to watching the chat as well as other stuff. If you have questions as things come up, I'm going to do my best on this screen right over here to watch one of the streams, the LinkedIn stream typically. And I'll do my best to weave in questions you might have, because I think in some ways, the most interesting stuff that's happened has been in conversation, not just in broadcast. In conversation between us, that is the thousands of entrepreneurs that have gone through different programs and stuff like that. And then some very specific people who have actually made it possible for me to still be doing this type of work all these years later. But what is this thing called Tech Ranch? Well, we've worked with, 6,500 entrepreneurs worldwide. We've actually, in the Austin area, we've had more than around 10,000 people go through a program that I started called the Campfire. And it's been an interesting ride. Probably, one of the things that I proud of the most is in the lower right-hand corner, a reflection of Tech Ranch was elected into one of the top social impact incubators in the United States. But truly, the idea, though, has gone beyond this organization and is reflected in the combined work that we have been doing together. That in this I mean you guys, and I'm kind of excited that I got to be a part of the orchestration of some of it. But there's something that I think I want to call out, and I'll do my best in the next few slides to do so. So the vision that started Tech Ranch was this idea that all the world's problems had already been solved. It's just a matter of connecting the entrepreneur of the solution to the market with a problem. One of the things that I might say is, William Gibson, the science fiction writer, actually said it this way, and my statement is just a corollary to what he said. The future's already here; it's not widely distributed yet. But then the more fundamental idea about this, the corollary is that with us working together as a community of entrepreneurs, all the world's problems could be solved already. And I'm going to tell you part of this story. So someone asked me when I was actually asking, what are the parts of the story would you guys like to hear? And part of what came up was someone said, well, hey, Kevin, in one sentence, what's your purpose? And so I've been working on that question for my whole freaking life. And the idea was to teach the world to work together. And it's been interesting how it keeps on coming up in different ways, forms, shapes, and stuff like that. But this idea about teaching the world to work together. Well, the things that happened with Tech Ranch happened with humble beginnings. There was 3 different people I'm going to mention really quick in 2002 who we organized together a entrepreneur group in Austin. This is way before entrepreneurship was cool. We were, country before country was cool. And Brian Massey in the lower right, Mason Hale, who's in the middle, and Matt Koym and I formed a group called the Reservoir Dogs. And the idea was the Reservoir Dogs were like this group of entrepreneurs that didn't really know each other. The funny thing about it is Mason named it because I had put together this group of people that I knew, and then and then because of something that happened, I didn't show up in time. So everyone's like, hey, what are we doing here? What are we doing here right now? And they started working, talking. The movie is a bad example. And if you actually have never seen the movie, you probably shouldn't. But it was an interesting thing of starting. This was the humble beginnings of organizing together this idea of entrepreneurs that could work with each other. And, a lot of times it's just a little bit of support back and forth that makes all the difference, especially for those of us that are really trying to take off and take like a, step way out in front and do something that might change the world. Well, so some interesting stuff happened. And if you've never been exposed to the hero with 1,000 faces, there's a gentleman by the name of Joseph Campbell who wrote a book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. There is this idea that if we hear it, and this is reflected in a lot of the religions in the world and a lot of the different spiritual practices in the world, that if we hear it, that there's this call that we take off and go through like all sorts of, the descent into hell, as you can see on this, and you go through the trials and there's helpers along the way. And then there's this goal of the quest. And then, sometimes the hero goes through all sorts of messes and stuff like that. And I'm going to tell you a few of mine to then return and then have something to offer to the community. And for me, I don't know how many times I've gone through this cycle, but part of the story that I want to tell you reflects on this. And the reason I tell you is I hope that maybe there's a possibility that by me telling a little bit about my story, it might help you find your own story, your entrepreneurial story. As I reflect on the scar tissue of the last 20 years and the scar tissue that I have to donate to all of you. But more importantly, it's, there's a sad part of the story that I'm going to tell you, but there's also a triumphant one. And I think that this is the thing as entrepreneurs, that the really great entrepreneurs figure this out. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm a really great entrepreneur. I'm going to say I'm a very tenacious entrepreneur. I'm going to say I'm a very driven entrepreneur. But I'm not sitting. I'm not Michael Dell. I'm not sitting on $1 billion empire and stuff like that. And not that that's what I ever really set out to do. But I wanted to actually tell this story because I think in what Joseph Campbell was pointing to, there's a really powerful thing to share. The really powerful thing to share is at this most fundamental path, this whole structure itself is probably the most important thing that I might tell you about. And as you hear this, and as you recognize some of these steps along the way for yourself, I'd love to have you share them, whether it's on the chats or in the chat, or if you're watching on one of the streams. I'd love to have you share that, because I think that one of the most important things that we can do as entrepreneurs, and it started with this group that Matt, Brian, myself, and Mason put together, is we started doing this, and this was more important than anything else that we might have done. So let's talk about this. What was it that was the call to adventure for me? Well, this was actually not a pleasant story, but what really started, I had this entrepreneurial career. I'd been on the cover of Computer World magazine. I had, built the e-commerce engine behind Dell. I had done all this sort of stuff. I built trading systems for Fidelity Investments. I, worked in Mexico with a bank down there. I'd done all sorts of crazy things. Really felt successful, was a millionaire going into, like around 30 or something like that. Then when I hit 34, and right around 34 to 35, this 20 years ago, my friend and a young woman that I thought of as a little sister, she took her own life. She took her own life, and she was the mother of that 1.5-year-old that you actually see in the picture, or she took her life when her son was 1.5 years old. And I looked at all the success that I had, all the, history and all that sort of stuff. And I said, who the blank cares about this sort of stuff? Because the truth is that, in a world that, I might be able to make all that sort of money and, do all this sort of impressive stuff and all that, that doesn't matter. This was my call to adventure. And it wasn't necessarily a pleasant one at all. It was like, is it really possible that I can live in a world where it's okay that a 24-year-old like Danielle would take her own life? And the truth is that it would have been cheaper if I had written her 10 years of $40,000 checks a year, just to say, hey, Danielle, don't worry about anything. But, and I don't want to like focus too much on this one thing, but this was the thing that I said, this shall not be again. I actually have to go do something about it. So I started looking for helpers along the way. And there's a woman who is running the LBJ library. That's it to the left, named Dr. Betty Sue Flowers. And she was also one of the people that I happened to know had been behind the Power of Myths series that had, she actually was the editor of that series. And you might have seen it on PBS, public broadcasting stations, because it used to be a very popular thing. It's a very interesting thing. And because I think that when we're really called, these archetypes and this mythological stuff really pulls up. Now, the worst part about it is many people suppress that. And I have suppressed the hell out of it myself many, many, many times over the last 20 years. But then the challenge comes back, and I'm going to actually tell you how it has. And some of the worst parts about it is like kind of some of the stories that you might actually think are hard stories are the ones I'm going to tell you during this next little bit of time that we spend together. But the truth is that if you have your mind in the right place, and this is what I'm learning, and I still have a lot to learn about this. If you have your mind in the right place, it's almost that stuff. If you've ever read about don't be resilient, be anti-fragile. What does anti-fragile mean? being anti-fragile means is as stuff happens to you, you don't just, return to your original shape, the resilient shape. What happens is you actually become stronger along the way. And one of the things that I've had this beautiful gift of actually happening is this has been true for me. It's been hard, but it's been true. Part of this that I mapped out at one other point was this idea that we all start out with this low salary, low sanity. I was a stock boy at this drugstore. And, I hated the job. Now, then I got my degree, and actually I went off and had this career. I worked for a Steve Jobs startup called Next, and I fell in love with startups and I fell in love with technology. And here's this crazy guy at the very front beating fist on table, talking about how we're going to go change the world and all that stuff. So I had a pretty cool career very early on. But then that terrible thing happened. Danielle took her own life. And I said, as wonderful as my career is, I've got to go find my mission. And my mission was to go forth and say, how is it we organize entrepreneurs, teach the world to work together, and then figure out, the more you can actually have solutions. If you want to take off all the problems of the world, you have to have this really long list of solutions. And that's outside of the United States. A guy named Bill Joyce said this. He said it like an adjacent thing. He said that there are more brains outside of your company than inside your company. The same thing is true for your city, your state, your country. There's more brains outside of your unit of people than inside. So if you really want to leverage them, you really want to change the world or something like that, you got to get a lot of people in there. And so what's happening is over the last few years, I've really been working on getting to this point of calling. And I think this is the thing that I want to call out to all of you is how is it as entrepreneurs, can we actually figure this out? How is it that we can, figure out how to get to our calling? And figure out what parts do we have to leave behind. Now, when I left my career, I really, there are times that are for those of you all that seen The Matrix, there's a moment when Neo is offered a red pill and a blue pill. And then later on, Neo is like, oh shit, I wish I'd taken the blue pill. There are many times that I have said, wow, I really miss just making the money that I used to make and having the ease and stuff like that before I took the red pill and took my mission on. But I think this is the thing that we actually are called to. And if we really want to live, this is the thing that we might look to about figuring out how to discover this. And so I say it this way, don't just build a business, launch a personal revolution. Now, this is not easy, and I'm not trying to underestimate it. And I'm going to tell you some really rough stuff. And we don't have enough time today for me to actually tell you some of the texture of the worst parts, the hardest parts and stuff like that. By the way, people are always like, Kevin, is that really you? Yeah, I used to have hair years ago. This is when I started my first company in 1994. And I was on site at one of my first customers, a bank in Mexico. And, that I never realized what that would represent. This was early in my career. But then, following my mission, I actually stepped out into a desert. And this happens to be a desert this is a picture I took of a desert in the northern part of Chile called the Atacama Desert. Part of what happened was Betty Sue Flowers said, hey, Kevin, if you're serious about this vision, you need to go meet this guy. Oh, by the way, he's a senator. Oh, by the way, he's a presidential hopeful in the country of Chile. And I don't know why. And she said this, I don't know why you need to go meet this guy, but you need to go meet this guy. And so here I am talking to the woman who co-authored the Power of Myth series, who really knows about art archetypes and stuff like that. She was supposed to spend 15 minutes with me on that first meeting. She spent 3 hours. I'm like, okay, I get it. Now, she didn't know, and there's a whole story about this that I could spend an hour on as well. She didn't know that the morning that she told me to go to Chile to meet the senator, then that afternoon, she didn't know that that morning I had been invited to go to Chile by one of my friends from high school who knew that I was torn up about Danielle's death. And so, and I never told her, I didn't tell her anything about what had happened because I was too freaked out. I didn't tell anyone about that for 5 years, at least 5 years. That Tuesday morning that, I had been invited to go to Chile by a buddy of mine named Will, who said, "Hey, Kevin, we're really sorry about Daniel's death. You need to get out of Austin. You need to unplug. Why don't you come to Chile? Then we'll go to Peru, go to Machu Picchu. It'll be really good for your soul." And so, mega long story short, as freaked out as I was, and I'm like, I'm going crazy. This is weird. This is weird synchronicity. I set out to Chile. I was on a flight within a week after that. And helpers along the way, there's a guy named Alvaro that helped me get connected to the senator. It took a lot. It wasn't just a matter of, here in the United States, you can just call someone up. In Chile, you have to know someone to get introduced. Otherwise, you're not going to get introduced. And there's a whole story about that as well. But along the way, there was also my buddy Leonardo, one of the, over the last 20 years, one of the most important collaborators in the work that we're doing. He is a force of nature based in Chile doing something called extreme collaboration that we need to have him on and have him talk. And also a gentleman named Rafael Panteon, who is the closest person that I know that he's a Buddhist and one of the most brilliant coaches that I've ever met. And you would never imagine the wisdom. These two guys, Leonardo and Rafael, were the two people that the senator said, "Hey, if you're serious about this, I'm not going to deal with you directly. There's 4 people who he put in charge of me. That were my handlers in Chile, and we ended up working with 1,000 entrepreneurs in that first year. But the idea about it was, Rafael would say, "Why are you in Chile?" And sometimes the best thing I could say was, "I don't know." It was kind of interesting, but and there's stories about that as well. But that laid the groundwork that here I am 20 years later, and I'm reflecting on things that Leonardo and Rafael told me and still learning the wisdom of what was given to me then. I think that's how, when archetypes are at play, that sort of stuff really happens. And one of the things, I'm giving a speech in Chile. Shout out to Chile. I'm going to give a speech in Chile on August 2nd, and I'm really looking forward to reconnecting with all you people that Leonardo and Rafael and Alvaro and others, those 1,000 entrepreneurs that I worked with, really planted seeds in my heart that have gone off to doing lots of different things. But then in 2005, many of you know that I came back to Austin after 2003, worked together on a bunch of different innovation projects. 2004, started the Bootstrap Incubator, which you can see here. It says enterprise teaming. The whole concept that I came up with is how do we get enterprises, businesses teaming together? And so the Bootstrap Incubator was started in 2005. That's what this is. And if you go to 4202 Spicewood Springs, I went there not too long ago, and the sign was still there, even though it's been many years. We ended up going through 6 different locations with a co-working place. And part of the story is I ended up selling that business in 2017 because it was getting in the way of the bigger vision of what I had for the incubation work we're doing. But this is where it went. And one moment I ended up going back and spending a substantial amount of time in Chile. One of the speeches I gave right here is in between the 2010-2014 timeframe. We launched a project in the northern part of Chile in the Atacama Desert called Atacama 7. And there's always interesting technologies that were happening. I saw this technology for how you could superimpose images in Chile before I ever saw it here. This got me thinking about what might be happening. But many of you have known the story as well, that around the 2003-2005 timeframe, a guy named Bajoy started a group called Bootstrap Austin, and I had started our dogs. We ended up putting these two together. I could tell stories just about Bajoy and myself as we were trying that early stages about building out Bootstrap Austin and, helping. Here we are with Josh helping Capital Factory get started as well. things like that. Bootstrap Austin ended up having, at its most powerful moments, was just a Yahoo group that had a monthly meeting, but 800 people in it, and it was pretty profound about what was happening at the time. In fact, Gary Hoover, who many of you might have heard of before, a very successful Austin-based entrepreneur, said, "Bootstrap Austin is among the most effective tools for entrepreneurs that I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot." The thing about it is this idea of mutual support, working back and forth, building on the Austin hippie culture, the Austin musician hippie culture of, I'm going to help you play in your band, you're going to help me play in my band. That whole set of concepts, that actually was what we tried to do as entrepreneurs, technology entrepreneurs especially, was capture part of what had happened among the musicians that we knew. And it ended up creating this amazing thing. And this was one of the most powerful things. Now, at the same time, I was running the Bootstrap Incubator, the co-working location. You can see some of our activities that we were doing here, as well as activities that when we helped Concordia University launch their co-working place as well, that, is very, very powerful. I think as much as anything that the city, the state, or the governments did, or the research institutions did, I'm really proud of this group, because I think we laid the foundation for the Austin entrepreneurial culture that came. And it's early, but this was kind of the idea that then what's been happening later is, how is it, as you see, as those of y'all that know the work that we're doing around the world, the idea here is, how is it that we can actually take this idea of, at the time that we're talking about, Austin didn't have density. It didn't have density of entrepreneurs. We couldn't replace Silicon Valley with, density. We actually had, we had to create connective tissue. This whole idea of enterprise teaming. Let's create connective tissue among us. What we're actually doing, just to give you kind of a view of the future as we build venture bridges around the world, is how do we create connective tissue around the world to make this sort of stuff happen? That's what's been happening. And so a lot of stuff happened, but then here it came. I think it was February 2009, and I had hit kind of a plateau of what's happening, and one of life's little difficulties happened. Now, the photo, and why does a guy with an iPhone take a photo of himself after he's been assaulted at 4th of Brazos? There's no telling. It was an interesting experience to have this happen. 4 guys surrounded me, shattered my nose with brass knuckles, and I had been out drinking and just wasn't paying attention to my surroundings. Now, it ended up that I ended up having a very powerful outcome out of it. I ended up defending myself, and in what started as a nonviolent way, and then ended up becoming kind of violence. But I ended up getting to walk away. I was very, very fortunate. I'm the only person in all the gang violence that happened in downtown Austin during those few months of 2009 that you can read about online. I'm the only person that had been attacked like that got to walk away. They got to, out of sheer pride, I walked into Brackenridge emergency room just out of sheer pride. But the more fundamental thing is like recognizing how my life was kind of out of whack. It was really, really powerful because it woke me up to the next level. And I'll tell you more about this story alone. But the truth is that a guy by the name of Jonas Lamas and I had partnered up. And Jonas said, "Hey, this is really cool what you're doing with the Bootstrap Incubator, but I got an idea about how we can actually take it to the next level. Why don't we call it Tech Ranch?" Why? This is 2008, 2009 timeframe, and get things going. Now, Jonas and I did more in those 2 or 3 months, after I'd kind of gotten woken up a little bit, plus being around him. It was really powerful about what happened in such a short period of time. Worst part about it was, and one of the more difficulties was, Jonas's wife was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, and he ended up having to leave. But he had to focus on the family, and his wife was, having serious difficulties at the time. But it ended up being a very powerful experience of just him having the impact that he had on me and Tech Ranch, or the organization I had, and turning it into Tech Ranch. This is another one of the inflection points. We ended up building up a program called Employee to Entrepreneur. I know in the studio audience right now, we have a couple of people that were in that first group. The idea, yeah, it's funny. RD he was in one of the first groups. This is the program that ended up becoming what we called Venture Forth. And we ran 50 cohorts of this program. Around 50 cohorts of this program. Started out called Employee to Entrepreneur, but I switched the name to Venture Forth. And the whole idea is, these cohorts around 15 entrepreneurs running a 10-week program, working with each other in a way that some of them have now gone off and, made tens of millions of dollars by just and brought their own groups together. Really powerful thing that happened all the way back then. But the thing I noticed was something else in the program. It wasn't about the technology insight. It wasn't about the angel investing that was happening. It wasn't about, there's all this knowledge that's important to know, and build a business. All this stuff is critical to have as part of the process. But there was something else that was happening. Now, this the picture of the woman there is her name is Laura DeForge. You can actually read about this on her blog if you want. But what the little napkin says: feel free to do what I want to do, full of grace. And there's a few things that I'll spare you the details. But the thing that happened was there was a recognition that the value that entrepreneurs were getting out of our programs wasn't about investment, wasn't about all of the normal things that we think about entrepreneurship. It was about how to engage in the hero's journey and take off. Laura now lives in Tuscany. She lives in, last time I hung out with her, she was in Florence. She's having the life that she always wanted. She defined she actually came to one of our campfires, and the picture that you're seeing right there is after running into her, after going to one of our events or one of our programs, I ended up accidentally running into her at a bar. And while we're with a group of people, I said, "Hey, so what is it you're going to do?" Following up on some of the things. And that's where she wrote it down on a note. Now, one of the most important parts of this story, though, was when, in a few slides, when I tell you about how I was up against really difficult times, when you see the thing the cast that's going to be on my arm in a little bit, I was up against really difficult times. And I was pretty much thinking, hey, I really miss my old career. I need to shut down what we're doing. I want to go do something else. I'm tired of not making the money I used to make. I'm not, blah, 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 blah. And I get this text. "Hey, Kevin, it's Laura. I'm not sure if you remember me, but I'm in the Munich airport in my next stop. Not Munich airport. I'm in, why am I forgetting the name of the airport? The big one in Frankfurt. I'm in Frankfurt, and I'm en route to Italy. And guess what? The seeds that she planted with this little vision statement about what she was up to based on kind of the conversations that we'd had in this big group, she finally was taking place and taking it on. But then she told me about it, and it happened to come in right at the moment that I was just like, hey, I just need to stop, because running real estate for an innovator that's used to doing very high margin businesses, to run a real estate operation where it's really low margin, like co-working is and stuff like that. Sometimes that is the mismatch of, this entrepreneur fitting in this. But what ended up happening was that that text came in right at the right time, when I was actually saying, God or whoever, help me make this decision about what I'm supposed to do next steps. The other thing that happened was Invest in Bavaria in 2014 asked me if I would come to Bavaria. They'd heard about the early work that I'd done in Chile many years before. And they said, hey, we'd like you to come to Invest in Bavaria and look at what we're up to In fact, this picture right here is at a place called Fraunhofer Institute. And if you might not be able to read the captions, but it's about medical technologies and stuff like that. Well, part of what I started recognizing is what the original vision was. This little bit of travel helped me remember about what was happening. And I mentioned that part of what happened in my Aikido program, I study Aikido. I've been studying Japanese martial arts for more than 30 years now. I essentially ripped my bicep tendon on the mat. And part of what happened is I had to have surgery to reattach it. In fact, there was a period of time that I couldn't even hold this coffee cup. Like, this would be too much weight after the injury. And so I had to have surgery to put it back together. And for an empowered, man to lose access to his right hand, just created ripples of psychological issues you would not imagine. But between going to Bavaria without my arm and other sort of stuff, I started hearing the wisdom in the quote that's in the next slide that I want to talk about. And, I got to see Anthony Bourdain roughly around this time, where he was saying something about travel. If you see the statements that he's made about travel, that there's something about travel that changes you. And that trip to Bavaria, with not having an arm and being reminded about my experience in Chile, really had an impact. And for those of y'all that are listening versus getting to see what's on the screen, I'm going to read this to you. If I'm an advocate for anything, it is to move as far as you can, as much as you can, across the ocean or simply across the river. The extent to which you walk in someone else's shoes or at least eat their food is a plus for everybody. Open your mind, get off the couch, move. Anthony Bourdain. So when I heard that first set of quotes, where he really started talking, I never was really into the cooking side of the show and all that sort of stuff, but here was someone that was seizing the day through travel. And there was like something about that reminded me about why I had started Tech Ranch and why I had, struggled in the streets of Chile, working with this vision and these entrepreneurs in a language that I just barely spoke at the time and things like that. But this is kind of where things started. And then it got to this place as well. There was, I went to Burning Man, and I had actually, this was my first time there. And I was really struggling to make, this period of the life was like really struggling. I'm going to read this quote for you as well, because it's a Rumi quote. I think some of the most important business books that you'll ever read are not about business. They're about, they're poetry books. And here's one of the things that this was scrawled in a marker on the inside of a piece of art at Burning Man. It says, "Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. That dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond." Rumi. The main thing I want to say about this was the thing that during this period of time that wasn't very pleasant in Tech Ranch's history. The main thing that I wanted to say was this woke me up and said, hey, Wayne, pay attention to who's around you. Which Dr. Andrew Neerlinger, who's on the left, very, very good friend, in 2017 said, hey, I've started the Pandemic Tech Accelerator. I'd like to get your advice on some stuff. And if you don't mind, can we leverage the Tech Ranch network to solve some different problems? He specifically, and now this is a picture of when we were in Abuja, Nigeria, working with 20 different entrepreneurial companies that are taking on different aspects of pandemics and just, public health and things like that. A lot of stories to be told just around that. But the thing that Andrew asked me is, he said, hey, if we can find out the following two capabilities in the world for solving taking on this one disease. Most of the people that have leishmaniasis or that get infected with leishmaniasis, and leishmaniasis is a really disfiguring disease. A sand flea bites you in the middle of a desert someplace. And typically a lot of the deserts have people that are very poor. The sand flea bites. And if you don't do anything about it, it ends up infecting the hand or the arm, and it might take your life. It might take your life. It might take, it certainly will disfigure you in a way that looks, to my eyes, like leprosy. Make a long story short, we ended up putting together entrepreneurs from a couple different places, mainly from our South Australian entrepreneurs. And we were able to take that on. And that technology is now being used in Ethiopia and other places. And this project, which started out over a glass of wine, a Rhone varietal wine that I was swirling and enjoying, my company with Andrew at a really difficult time, because I was selling the co-working business. I was, had a relationship ended. I found out that another business partner was embezzling funds from Tech Ranch. Found out a lot of really difficult things. And Andrew said, hey, help me solve this problem and we'll go, help a bunch of lives. I don't know how many people have now been affected by this in a positive way, but it's I've been told at one point it was more than 1,000. And it started just over a glass of wine. And this started really cementing in my mind about how random connections, if they're harnessed together, we can bring in, we tease out this network thing, the enterprise teaming concept of way before, that there's something fundamental about what we can do together with the way things happened. And so this is this is where things got really serious. I know this is, I hopped all the way over to 2017. But then I'm like, wait, this is what we should be doing. So part of what happened was I ended up going off to a bunch of different countries, 6 different countries within 3 months, all at invitations. This is in Luleå, Sweden. Luleå is in the northern part of Sweden. This is one of the sister cities of Austin. The travels took me to Lithuania, to Nigeria. This is a article when I was in Forbes, Korea. Here I am in Palestine. Here I am with another group in another part of the world. Here I am in Australia working with, this is the Minister of Innovation at the time and Aboriginal Affairs. In fact, he took me to one of the Aboriginal places that was having their 20-year homecoming. And I got to meet one of the chiefs. But part of the thing that it started reminding me is by these small efforts of working together, especially around the world, we can have impact. In fact, Leonardo, the gentleman that I mentioned about this in his first book about extreme collaboration, started really writing about this. This is where he was talking about me and enterprise teaming, the captions in Spanish there, but we was really excited to actually be a part of his publication. But the idea is we started recognizing these capabilities and, struggling to kind of figure out how to get, traditional way of doing economic development. People ignore this sort of stuff. They don't think about it. They can't see it. They can't see the future. A lot of people that are used to doing business, we haven't done that around here before. They couldn't see this type of extreme collaboration about what's possible. But yeah, there's activities that we did in South Korea. This is Mr. Jay Lee and Severine was one of our one of our employees at Tech Ranch. Jay was one of our entrepreneurs that helped lead the way. Some of the photos from the trip to Pakistan that we did as well. And it was in these moments of inspiration, especially as I was at this one mosque, that I really started understanding that, yeah, there's a possibility that this model that I had come up with all these years before could actually work. And so if you look at this one photo in Pakistan, this is one of the first times, this is 2016. It's one of the first times that after I came out of that dark night of the soul, that I started seeing how our entrepreneurs around the world were doing this. Now, what was interesting is for the first time in my life when I was in Pakistan, I had written my will right beforehand because I was going into an area that I didn't think that, we had protection and all that sort of stuff, but it was kind of dangerous. In fact, the gentleman right here was one of the ministers, at the time. The thing that's interesting about this is we're signing an MOU between his organization, which is called Plan 9, and Tech Ranch. It is all supported by the city of Austin and the city of Lahore. It really put things in frame, because the next week after I left, in the room that we were in, his window was shot out by an AK-47. Now he ended up being fine, but the fact is that violence was that at hand, and it just put things in the middle of, like, this is what's serious about the world. But what was interesting about it, was that I was happy for the first time in probably 2 or 3 years. And I finally, after all the struggles and all the crap and all that sort of stuff, could see, hey, this might work. So I came back to Austin and I hopped on my mountain bike. I went around Town Lake and was just celebrating. It was the day after, it was Black Friday 2016. And I was just so excited. I'd just been to 6 countries within 3 months. And I'd had the vision really opened up in front of me. And then boom, I was hit by a car on my bike. The driver wasn't paying attention. He was delivering for post notes. And as I flew through the air and thankfully landed on the asphalt in a way that my martial art background taught me to blend with, just by the grace of God. I was grabbed by God's hand or whatever, bounced a few times, had a concussion, but ended up the right side, the left side of that car, that wheel dropped about a foot from my head. My head was right around here on that photo when things happened. And yeah, you can see where I was hit. And again, life's little teachers were like saying, what the hell? Because it felt like everything was going great. And this is actually where things got really interesting, because this is when I had to actually make a decision. Am I going to let this hold me down? And this was yet another frickin' call to adventure. So there's a lot of stories that I can actually tell you on the in between about what's happened over the last few years. But the thing that I think is profound is stories like this. Now, the photo that I took here is of another child, is not the child that's talked about in the caption. A child's sight was saved. I'll read it to you for those of you all that are hearing this and not getting to see what's on the screen. Working with an organization called Half Helen organization, the Half Helen. It's interesting. There's a group here in town called Half Helen, and the woman who started Half Helen is said that she was half Helen Keller because she lost her hearing. She lost her sight, one her ear and one eye, but it was a preventable condition. There's a long story about what happened, but because of some insight that she had that was shared with a group that went to Guatemala, and that then was another entrepreneur based here in Austin who went to Guatemala and then went to Mexico. A kid's sight was saved just because of a random, simple connection. And again, I've got a lot of stories like this. I got at least 30 stories that are just like the leishmaniasis and the kid's sight and stuff like that. The main thing that I want to say about it is, I'll read this just so that it's out there. But a Mexican child's sight was saved as a result of connections made at one of Tech Ranch's unique campfire networking events. The introduction to the Mexican Minister of Health and locating someone traveling to San Miguel enabled an innovative screening device to travel to a clinic in San Miguel. Many children were screened for the medical condition, and a child received treatment that saved his sight. There's a lot of different examples about this. And the thing that I want to challenge us is we make our world, because there's a lot of disruptions. COVID came, political unrest came. We've got a war that should not be happening in Ukraine going on. A lot of people are kind of depressed. I talked about that last time, and they're falling down on what's happening. But I want to point to these type of business-based solutions, not just charity, although charity has a place, where we can bring people together in short order and make wonderful things happen. Wonderful things happen. I want to point to the hopeful story. It's the hopeful stories that when I've been in my shit and had really big difficulties on saying, why the hell did I take the blue pill? I reflect on this sort of stuff. And this isn't about me. This is about, yeah, maybe I connected two different entrepreneurs, one of them that had the solution, one of them that knew about the problem. But this is the sort of stuff that I think, as we recognize that the internet is pulling us even closer together, that with just a little bit of insight and a willingness to shift our minds, and we have to shift our minds, we can actually have these type of impacts. And so the thing I want to say is this: the only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. It's Albert Camus quote. This is such an important thought that it's easy to get wrapped up in what's on social media and what's on, all the bullshit that might try to distract us and things like that. But my idea that I want to point to and invite us into and learn from you about how to take it to the next level, and I'm really, that really is a call out as I celebrate my birthday today, is to remind myself to be free and to challenge you to be free and have you challenge me to be free, because many of you have picked my ass up over the last few years. I have not acknowledged all the people that I feel like I need to, that have made this possible. But the thing I want to say is, it's like the stories about those little kids that have impacted your investment in me or other entrepreneurs in our network. And I'm talking about investment of just saying, hey, get off your ass. Sometimes it's sometimes it's been very gentle. Sometimes it's been really rough. The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. And that is our work to do. That is the work that I think, as I reflect on what some entrepreneur might have learned from me or someone else in our network, it's not about, we need angel investment. Yes, we need to make sure we figure out the customers and stuff like that. We have to figure out all those things. Those are extremely important. But this inner game, both inside each one of ourselves, as well as in between us, this is the most important work. This is the most important work. And the work from here is to continue to build bridges between our cities, between ourselves, between, the world. And, we're building venture bridges. You can read a little bit about it at, Tech Ranch if you want to, techranch.com, and then click on the global bridges idea. But most importantly is not necessarily that program or something like that, but the idea about how we open ourselves up to working with each other and push even farther than what we might have done before, and recognize that the crappy moments, the shit that has happened if you believe this idea of becoming anti-fragile, this is our work to do. This is what we're here to support each other in this hero's journey that we're talking about. With that, I got 1,000 other things I could say, but I want to try to keep us to the normal time that we actually have. If there was a question or two, I certainly would take it. I know that we got a lot of comments. I appreciate everyone telling me happy birthday and all that sort of stuff. I am going to do my damnedest to free myself, and I want to make sure that you guys do as well. And some of you that know me personally know that I've actually got the next little bit of grief that's come up about some stuff that happened in my personal life. Not here to talk about that, but I am here to say that I'm going to do my best, and I invite you to do your best as well, to use whatever it is the happy, the joy moments, the sad, the grief, to push yourself, to use it as fuel, to not numb out, to not actually think that buying something or, going on a vacation or blah, 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 whatever the distraction might be, is going to somehow, yeah, there's moments to take the break. There is moments to take a break. I'm not saying don't take a break. I'm saying let's use it as fuel. Let's use it as fuel for ourselves. Let's use it as fuel for working with each other. Um, Real quick notes for those of you all that are still here and listening and all that sort of stuff. Today's program is a little bit different than what our venture outfitter programs are. We'd like to do a number of different things. Part of the thing that we like to do is sometimes we'll have a expert come speak to us about, like, next week, we're going to have Barry Thornton, and Barry's got a really colorful past and sometimes really pushy words about what he says. Sometimes we actually do things where we have like an expert in a specific field kind of talk about different things. Sometimes we have our entrepreneurs just have a community meeting where it's like, hey, tell me what you're up to. And we've had sessions where we've had up to 15 countries represented by different people in the studio audience alone, not to mention what's happening on the streaming sites of YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook. But part of what I want to point to is just like about making sure that you know that that you can get into the community for free. You can actually come to these programs for free. Right now, we're keeping the studio audience so that the sessions that are much more interactive, so that it's very natural, instead of just using our Restream program as a broadcast studio, which we will do every once in a while. Part of the idea is to be able to go back and forth. If you want to be a part of community.techranch.com, there is if you go to techranch.com/connect, there's a place to sign up for free. We do have elements of our programs that are pay to play, but because we want to make this accessible, whether you're in Bolivia, Texas, Nigeria, Czech Republic, I mean, we have entrepreneurs from 42 different countries right now that are involved. Please join us. All right. If I have a question or two, you can either like grab my attention. It's sometimes easier if you raise your digital hand, but I don't know today, since I didn't really prep for that sort of stuff, that I necessarily have anyone that's there. There were a couple of questions that I got asked in the brief thing. I think I went over most of that. Penny asked me, what has been your most validating situation? I think I told you it's like the stuff where you guys said, hey, let's do the following thing, and then something happened, and I'm like, oh my God, this really does work. There's been things like, if I could have told myself 20 years ago 5 things, what would they have been? 20 years ago, I was so focused on the outward focus and frame of entrepreneurship, and now I'm like, the number one game for any entrepreneur I ever met is the inner game, and the game, like the work that's being done inside, as well as the work that's being done between us, like, how is it that, it's not just the accomplishments of what our companies might do together, but about how we support each other, like what I call the Austin model of entrepreneurship, learning from the hippie musicians who cared about each other enough to work with each other, getting to come back to that when in Silicon Valley, people are like, even if there weren't competitors, they're cutting each other's throats. It's just crazy to see. That's a thing, that Austin hippie thing that I learned back then. I want to make sure we bring it to the world. Cool. Well, let's see. If there's not any questions, anyone? Great to see Jeff Simpler, one of my buddies from undergrad electrical engineering. Zach Jiwa, good luck with your trip to Europe. I'm excited. Richard Hurley, the story that you tell about the child that was on the autistic spectrum that you got to play a Chopin piece of music. It's one of the most important things. Sebastian, let's make more connections to Colombia. Christia, thank you for your poetry. It motivates me like Rumi. For the other people like Fernando and our other teams that are listening to this online, thank you all. I appreciate it. Tell you what, I will, unless there's someone else that would like to, I know most people have their screens off, and I think Jello just brought a bunch of different people on. But main thing is like, this is to you guys. Thank y'all for joining us in the studio audience today. Thank you for joining us on the streams online. If there's anything that we can do for you, and like whether it's a community problem or if it's a community problem that you haven't found the entrepreneurs that have the solution for, let us connect you. One of my favorite examples is taking on moral injury that was happening between doctors in Egypt with insight that came from Italy, Mexico, and Texas. That sort of stuff really matters. James, thank you for your note. What a journey. I appreciate your note. Eric, amazing story of your journey and transformation. Kevin, thanks for the invitation. I look forward to talking about India. Yes, I look forward to, we've gotten to do it just a little bit of stuff with Startup India, but not anywhere near enough given the activities that are happening there. Okay, well, Errol, thank you for joining us as well. And good to see you all. I tell you what, I'll go ahead and for anyone that wants to stick around after we finish the broadcast, you're more than welcome to. What I'll do for now is I'm going to go ahead and go to two different slides. This one that says techcreators.com/connect. If you want to plug in, make sure that you're on the newsletter. We have a really cool team now. We have Paloma in Mexico City, Enrique in Querétaro, Emma that's in Tabasco. Those three are in Mexico. We have Jello, who is doing all the video production out of the Philippines. We have Omar, who kind of leads the bridge to Egypt and the Middle East. Myself, that's very focused on the Americas and in Europe. Looking for other people that want to support us, like the activities that we've done in other parts of Asia and other parts of Africa have been really cool to see. And a lot of times it's not about the United States, because the technology that can be found in one place, there's a technology out of Chihuahua, Mexico, where, this one entrepreneur can detect heart attacks up to 8 hours before the big event, like the big event that we see, where the guy clutches his heart and then falls over dead. You can actually, for about $2 with the technology that came out of northern Mexico, detect that. That would have never gotten developed in the United States. And it's beautiful that it got developed there. And I'm happy to have us connect things together around the world. techranch.com/connect, sign up, get involved in our community for free, come back to these events. We'll have a lot of more activities and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, it is about, we use the metaphor of the Wild West to say that it is about pioneering, and pioneers knew to work with each other, even when they didn't know each other before the moment that they were taking on an existential threat together. This is the whole idea that behind this work. With that, it's my honor to get to work with entrepreneurs that are driven by vision and values. Thank you for being a part of this journey. It's been hard at times, but today on my birthday, I celebrate you. Thank y'all.